Well, President Obama meets with leaders of the European Union at the White House to talk about the threat of a financial collapse in Europe.
The biggest thing is Europe's economic crisis.
You know, if Europe is contracting or if Europe is having difficulties, then it's much more difficult for us to create good jobs here at home because we send so many of our products and services to Europe. It is such an important trading partner for us.
And children's eyes are wide.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show. Yesterday, the world's major central banks launched it was a joint action to provide cheap money to Europe to prop it up, meaning the Federal Reserve decided to ease its lending. Dollars cheaper in Europe, meaning what? At the end of the day, the market goes up 50 points. And in the end, with your money, the dollar is devalued. Europe helped, the dollar goes down even further. How is this good for Americans, short-term, long-term? Joining us now, Congressman Ron Paul, presidential candidate, Texas Republican, and a man who basically has is it true that, Congressman Paul, you have a voodoo doll with the Fed chairman, Ben Bernanke, and the pins go in every day at the end of the day? How are you, sir?
No, that's a rumor. That's not true. But
you should sell them, though. It'd be a good idea.
Well known. When they're before the committee, they know where I stand.
I got you. Well, Congressman, tell us just in really simple terms, easy to understand terms, what happened yesterday, so the folks listening, Denver and Jacksonville, Florida, all around this country, can process it and understand how it works for them or doesn't work for them.
Well, we're in a worldwide debt crisis, and our dollar's in bad shape, and we're in a debt crisis. But what they agreed to is our dollar would bail out the whole world, which means that they're going to print a lot more money, create more credit, devalue our currency. And the only reason they can get away with this is that the dollar has been the reserve standard of the world for 40 years, and there's still a bit of trust in it because all the other currencies are less trustworthy, and they won't consider using real money like gold or silver. So therefore, as long as that trust lasts, the burden will be on the dollar, which means the burden on the American taxpayer as we bail out those holders of sovereign debt as well as the banks. So this is bad news for us, especially bad news for our consumers and the individuals in this country, but good news for the bankers because they're once again look like they're going to get bailed out just as they were in 08 and 09.
And so long term, for the American families out there, so many of whom we've heard from on our show, Congressman Paul, who are really hurting this holiday season. Families are in deep crisis, financial crisis, and very anxiety-ridden. I'm sensing this stress among people, not just the usual Christmas stress, but the stress of being worried about their children in college and how they're going to pay for health care and prescriptions and so forth. For them, what does it mean for our way of life down the road with an increasingly devalued dollar on the international scene?
Their standard of living is going down. We lived for 40 years essentially above our means and beyond our means, so now we have to live beneath our means, so it's a real tragedy. But the real tragedy is that middle classes get wiped out when they destroy currency, and that's what we're witnessing. It's just the beginning. It's been going on for nearly 10 years, but it's still in the early stages. And then toward the end, it moves more rapidly, and that's when you have runaway inflation. So the standard of living will go down. The people on fixed incomes, people getting Social Security already know this, and you're probably hearing from them.
Yes.
But eventually, all this effort to increase benefits and send out more money and raise up more debt actually is a catch-22 because it makes things worse. In the early stages, if you print money and run up debt, it seems to help us get out of recessions. But eventually, it does exactly the opposite, and that's why this recession, depression, is so much different because the more they spend money and the more they print money, the worse our problems are going to get, and the longer the recovery will be delayed, and that's what we're witnessing right now.
Okay, so it's a Band-Aid on a festering sore.
That is exactly right, and they're in Washington. They're totally blinded to this. They talk about cutting spending, but there are no cuts, and they're pretending that there's not a debt crisis. Too many people have accepted the notion, left and right, that deficits don't matter. Deficits do matter. Debt does matter. Living beyond our means matters. And this is the reason, I've been rather bold in proposing that we could cut $1 trillion in 1 year, and that's what we have to do. But right now, they think that printing money and more debt is going to solve our problem.
Well, so far, and I might have missed something, but I haven't seen a lot from either Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich on this specific idea of a European bailout. And we saw a partial move toward a bailout yesterday by our Federal Reserve and other international banking institutions. But why do you think they're not addressing, at least, again, maybe something's been said that I've missed, but I don't hear any consistent line from pretty much anyone. I mean, you've been talking about this for decades, but on this issue, why? Let's start with Gingrich. Where do you think he would be on this?
Well, he would support it because he supported, the TARP bailouts and other things before. And I don't think he's really, any of the other ones have been truly exposed to Austrian free market economics. They are, in many ways, a variant or, if not true, Keynesians. And they believe this. So you hear this in the debates. You can tell where they're coming from because they don't challenge the monetary system. So they probably are quiet because they would have to, in many ways, endorse it because they support that type of system. So I don't think you'll hear any challenge to say no more bailouts. You have to do it. They're too big to fail. It's going to cause a crisis, and it would. It'd be a crisis for the banks, and it would be a crisis for countries like Greece and Italy. They would have to default, so they don't want to be on that side of it.
But Gingrich has said, Congressman Paul, that he said consistently, has he not, that the Fed should be audited and there should be a tougher stance against the Fed. And I know you just released a fairly tough ad that has gone viral on the internet against Gingrich. But what specifically about Gingrich gets under your craw? I mean, the one main criticism that Ron Paul has against Newt Gingrich, what would it be?
It's probably the flip-flopping and the being on different positions. I imagine Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac really bothers me. When you think about how much money he got from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that's really the taxpayers. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is a government agency because even though they weren't getting the money directly, they were getting benefits, and the people made a lot of money. The executives made a lot of money. But in a way, I see him as an executive making millions off Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and therefore people should know that he's part of the problem. How can he be the solution if he lived off Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? How can he be wanting to really clean up that mess if he's received so much money from them?
Well, he said he wasn't a lobbyist. He didn't lobby, and he made that clear in all of his contracts.
Well, it's legal to lobby, so I don't know. It's a matter of semantics. What was he giving him? I mean, it was influence and contacts, and even if he wasn't doing any of that, he was still an employee. And, so we had to bail them out. Matter of fact, they're still getting bailouts. In the last quarter, they still lost a lot of money. So indirectly, we're paying up as literally, I believe that Gingrich was able to benefit by the bailout because some of that money that they lost was taken up by the taxpayers. So he benefited before it was recognized where those funds were really coming from.
Do you think Newt Gingrich should give back the money he made from those institutions?
Well, that would be a complex issue because probably under the law, the law doesn't make anything he did illegal.
Right, that's my point. So he's not illegal, so you're just calling him a hypocrite.
Hypocrisy, inconsistent, willing to live off the government and government agencies like this to promote policies that I think are not good for our country.
Is Newt Gingrich a conservative?
I wouldn't put him in that category. He was known to be from the left wing of the party, especially early in his years. He would come up with conservative viewpoints and all, but that doesn't make him a conservative. I don't put him in that category.
Why do you think he's surging across the country?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, if you look at the last four people that surge across the country, it seems like they get some media attention, and I think it is a more reflection on the people and the way polling goes rather than, a true fact that all of a sudden he's endorsed by this many people. But just think how many candidates now have surged. They got a lot of media attention and say, oh, this guy's going to beat Romney, and then they drop off. So it remains to be seen how long this lasts.
Yeah, well, you don't think he's not Herman Cain, though, right? I mean, he's quite a bit different from Herman Cain or even Michelle Bachmann. I mean, he's been through the fire, has he not?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing he's benefiting by. Everybody knows so much of what he's done in the past, but I still think the policy flip-flopping deserves to be known by the people and where he's been on these issues.
And Congressman Paul, how do you, given the electoral layout that exists today, starting with the Iowa caucuses, where people are predicting that you're going to do quite well? A lot of friends of mine who live in Iowa expect you to, do quite well in the caucuses, and you could even win the Iowa caucuses. How do you, from there, assuming you show quite well, how do you from there put together a strategy to capture this nomination and go on to compete against Barack Obama?
Well, I'm not good at changing strategies because in many ways I've been campaigning for the things I believe in for 30 years, and my strategy has always been to argue the case for individual liberty and constitutional government and, different foreign policy and protection of civil liberty. So I continue to do the same thing. And this strategy also involves, what we're doing in Iowa right now and New Hampshire. And your question is, what do you do after that? Well, I continue to do the same thing, and then if we're doing well, we will have momentum. We obviously have to and will benefit by even easier fundraising. Our fundraising has always gone pretty well, but we're spending a lot of money right now in Iowa and New Hampshire, and I think that's why we're doing well. But we have to then, it will be a different and a much bigger campaign come February, because we're going to have to be addressing many states. And having Super Tuesday and all these things. So it will be a challenge. So, but as far as I'm concerned, we have to just do exactly what we're doing. We have to stick with the message. We have to just do more of what we've been doing.
You know what I noticed about you over the years, and my dad was a fan of yours for back in the early 80s, late 70s. I noticed that you don't really get petulant or prickly with the media. And there's concern that Mitt Romney, underneath it all, gets very petulant. And my Facebook crowd here is saying the word imperious even. Do you notice that about Romney when you spend time with him up on stage, or do you notice anything like that?
I haven't noticed that too much, but I don't see. Oh, you mean maybe the way he deals with the interviews, in our debates? I haven't paid a whole lot of attention. I don't know whether I'd have volunteered that or not, but you probably have a more accurate opinion than I do.
Yeah, you don't seem to get fazed by the questions that are thrown at you. It's kind of even keel, steely-eyed approach to these questions, which I think a lot of people like. Congressman, we really appreciate your joining us in the analysis of what's happening with the Fed and how this temporary juicing of the markets always comes back to bite us. Always comes back to bite us.
It surely will. Wait till next year and you'll see the real consequences.
All right. We appreciate it. Ron Paul on the Laura Ingraham Show, candidate for the presidency, Republican nomination, Texas Republican. And when we come back, the Huntsman daughters strike back at Art and Soul.
Ron Paul has been consistently correct.
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Thanks for listening to this podcast excerpt of The Laura Ingraham Show. If you'd like to receive podcasts of our complete shows, go to lauraingraham.com and sign up to become a member of Laura 365. Our Laura 365 members get commercial-free streams and podcasts of our shows every day we're on the air. And also you can listen to the last 30 days of The Laura Ingraham Show. Be ahead of the curve. Join Laura 365.